London, 1842. The Palace of Ashford gleamed like a jewel beneath the autumn moon, its stone walls draped in gold and crimson banners that snapped in the cold wind. Inside the royal chambers, where silk curtains whispered secrets to the draughty hallways, Lady Rosalind Thorne stood before a gilded mirror, her hands folded in her lap, her heart as cold as the marble floors beneath her slippered feet. Tomorrow she would marry King Edmund III, a man of 58 years with 3 dead wives behind him and a kingdom that demanded an heir. At 22, Rosalind possessed the pedigree necessary for a queen, the breeding, the beauty, the obedient silence expected of women born to serve the crown. Her chestnut hair had been arranged in perfect curls. Her pale blue gown fitted to display her figure without impropriety. She was, by every measure, the ideal bride for a king. She was also, by every private measure, dying inside. "You look magnificent, my dear," her mother, the Countess of Thorne, said from the doorway, her voice bright with satisfaction. "The king will be most pleased. Tomorrow you shall wear the crown jewels. Can you imagine? Our family, restored to glory." Rosalind's reflection stared back at her, a woman she barely recognized. "Yes, mother, I can imagine." The Countess crossed the room, her silk skirts rustling with each step. She placed her hands on Rosalind's shoulders, her grip firm despite the gentleness of her smile. "You understand what this means, do you not? Your father's debts erased, your brother's commission secured, our estate saved from ruin, all because you have done your duty." "I understand perfectly," Rosalind replied, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. "Duty before desire, position before happiness. The words we have lived by all my life." The Countess's smile tightened. "Happiness is a luxury, child. Queens do not have the privilege of personal preference. They have power, they have influence, they shape kingdoms, and they die young." Rosalind thought, but did not say. 3 queens before her had entered King Edmund's chambers as brides and left as corpses. Childbirth, the physicians had said. Natural causes, tragic accidents of fate. But Rosalind had heard the whispers in the servant corridors. She had seen the fear in the eyes of the ladies-in-waiting who had served those queens. She had read between the lines of carefully worded condolence letters. King Edmund did not kill his wives with his own hands. He killed them with indifference, with coldness, with the slow erosion of spirit that comes from being nothing more than a vessel for an heir. And when their bodies could bear no more, they simply stopped breathing. The Countess released her daughter's shoulders and moved toward the door. "Rest well tonight, Rosalind. Tomorrow begins your new life." When the door closed, Rosalind remained motionless before the mirror, her hands still folded, her expression carefully composed. 5 years of court training had taught her the art of becoming invisible, even while being watched. She had mastered the particular alchemy of being present yet absent, a skill that served as both shield and survival. But tonight, alone in the silence of her chamber, she allowed herself one forbidden thought. "I do not want this life." It was then that she heard it. A soft knock at the window. Rosalind turned, her heart leaping in her chest. The window overlooked the east gardens, 3 stories above ground. No one could reach it without a ladder or wings. Yet there it was again, a gentle tap against the glass. She moved to the window and drew back the heavy curtain. Outside, clinging to the stone ledge with one hand and gripping a rope with the other, was Prince Adrian, the king's only son. At 26, Prince Adrian was everything his father was not. Tall where the king was stooped, vibrant where his father was grey, warm where Edmund was ice. His dark hair fell across his forehead in wind-tossed waves. His blue eyes held a fire that made Rosalind's breath catch in her throat. For 3 months, since her engagement to the king had been announced, Adrian had watched her from across ballrooms and dinner tables. Their eyes had met over crystal glasses, and through the smoke of candle flames, they had never spoken more than polite pleasantries in public, but in those brief glances, entire conversations had unfolded. Now he hung outside her window like a madman, and Rosalind's carefully constructed composure shattered completely. She pushed open the window, the cold night air rushing in. "Your Highness." "What are you doing?" "Saving you," he said simply, his voice rough with urgency. "If you'll let me." Rosalind stared at him, her mind struggling to comprehend his meaning. "Saving me from what?" "From tomorrow," he replied. "From a marriage that will destroy you. From my father." He extended his free hand toward her. "Come with me, Rosalind. Tonight. Now." She stepped back from the window, her pulse pounding in her ears. "You're mad. This is treason. If we're caught, you'll be executed, and I'll be ruined. If you marry my father tomorrow, you'll be dead within 2 years," Adrian said flatly. "I've watched it happen 3 times. I will not watch it happen again. Especially not to you." The raw honesty in his voice struck her like a physical blow. "To you." As if she mattered beyond her bloodline and breeding. As if she were more than a convenient womb for the king's heir. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "You don't even know me." Adrian's gaze held hers, unwavering. "I know that you sit in the corner of every royal banquet, watching everyone with sad, intelligent eyes. I know that you laugh at the jester's jokes even when no one else does, because you're kind enough to notice his efforts. I know that you helped a servant girl who spilled wine on your gown last month, telling her it was your fault for moving too quickly." His voice softened. "I know that you're drowning, Rosalind, and everyone around you is handing you stones instead of ropes." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Royal brides do not cry. Even when you marry the king tomorrow, what will change?" Adrian continued, his hand still extended. "You'll have a crown, you'll have jewels, you'll have everything except freedom, safety, or love. Is that truly what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant," she replied, though her voice wavered. "My family, my duty." "Your family will survive without sacrificing you," Adrian interrupted. "And duty is a word powerful people use to control those without power." He leaned closer, his blue eyes blazing with intensity. "I'm offering you a choice, Rosalind. Perhaps the first real choice you've ever had. Come with me tonight. We'll ride to Scotland. We'll marry there before anyone can stop us. My father cannot execute his own daughter-in-law without international scandal." Rosalind's mind reeled. "Marry you?" she breathed. "But you're the prince, you're heir to the throne. You could have anyone." "I don't want anyone," he said simply. "I want you. I have wanted you since the moment I saw you at your engagement ball, standing alone by the rose garden, looking like you were attending your own funeral." The memory flooded back. She had indeed felt like she was mourning that night, mourning the life she would never have, the freedom she would never taste, the love she would never know. And then Adrian had appeared beside her, offering her a glass of champagne and a smile that made her forget, for just a moment, the weight of the crown she was about to wear. "You don't love me," she said, testing him. "You barely know me." "Then we shall learn each other," he replied without hesitation, "on the road to Scotland. In the months and years after. Is that not what marriage should be? 2 people choosing each other, discovering each other, building something together instead of being crushed beneath duty and expectation." His words painted a vision so beautiful, so impossible, that Rosalind felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crack. "If I go with you," she said slowly, "my mother will be devastated. My father's debts will remain. My brother will find his own path." Adrian finished. as you deserve to find yours. Your family has survived this long. They will adapt. But you, Rosalind, you will not survive marriage to my father. I've seen the way he looks at you, like your livestock being evaluated for breeding, like you're already a ghost." The truth of his words cut deep because she had seen that same look. She had felt it like ice water in her veins every time King Edmund's gaze lingered on her during formal dinners. The clock in her chamber chimed midnight. In 12 hours, she would walk down the aisle of Westminster Abbey. In 12 hours, her life would be sealed. Or she could choose differently. Rosalind looked at Adrian's extended hand, rough from riding and swordplay, strong from years of training for a throne he might never inherit if they succeeded in this mad plan. She looked at his face, open and urgent and filled with a hope she hadn't seen in anyone's eyes in years. And then she looked at her reflection in the darkened window glass, a woman in a cage, a bird with clipped wings. A sacrifice dressed in silk. "Just one night," she whispered. "Just one choice that's truly mine." Adrian's face transformed with relief and joy. "Then choose, Rosalind. Choose yourself. Choose freedom. Choose me." Her hand moved of its own accord, reaching toward his, trembling but certain. Yes. The moment her fingers touched his, everything changed. Adrian pulled her toward the window with gentle urgency, his movements efficient despite the precariousness of his position. "You'll need to climb down the rope. Can you manage it?" Rosalind glanced at the silk gown, the delicate slippers, the carefully arranged hair that had taken her maid 2 hours to perfect. Then she reached down, grabbed the hem of her skirt, and tore a long strip from the bottom, using it to tie the excess fabric around her legs. "I can manage," she said firmly. Adrian's grin was brilliant in the moonlight. "That's my girl. My girl." The words sent warmth flooding through her chest, a sensation so foreign after months of cold formality that she almost gasped aloud. She climbed through the window, her heart pounding, as Adrian guided her hands to the rope. Below them, the palace gardens stretched in shadowed elegance, the manicured hedges and marble fountains seeming impossibly far away. "Don't look down," Adrian murmured, positioning himself beside her on the narrow ledge. "Look at me." She did. His blue eyes held hers, steady and sure, and in that moment Rosalind realized she trusted him completely. Not because she knew him well, not because logic dictated such trust, but because every instinct in her body, every whisper of her heart, told her that this man would not let her fall. Together they descended, hand over hand, breath held, muscles straining. Halfway down, Rosalind's foot slipped on the stone, and she swung wildly for a heart-stopping moment. Adrian's arm shot out, catching her waist, steadying her against the wall. "I've got you," he said, his voice low and fierce. "I will always have you, Rosalind." When their feet finally touched the ground, Rosalind wanted to collapse with relief. Instead, Adrian grabbed her hand and pulled her into the shadows of the hedge maze, moving with the confidence of someone who had planned this escape meticulously. "There are guards at every entrance," he explained in a whisper as they navigated the dark pathways. "But there's a gate at the northeast corner that the gardeners use. It's hidden behind the rose garden. I've bribed the guard to look the other way tonight." "You planned this," she realized. "For how long?" "Since the day your engagement was announced," he admitted. "I told myself I would only intervene if you seemed truly unhappy. But every day I watched you, Rosalind. I saw the light in your eyes dim a little more. Tonight was my last chance to offer you freedom before the cage door locked forever." They reached the hidden gate just as a clock tower somewhere in the palace struck midnight. True to Adrian's word, the gate stood unguarded and slightly ajar. Beyond it, The London streets stretched into darkness, dangerous and unknown, and utterly liberating. A horse waited in the shadows, a strong-looking mare with saddlebags already packed. Adrian mounted first, then extended his hand to pull Rosalind up behind him. She settled against his back, her arms wrapping around his waist, and felt the solid warmth of him through his coat. "Hold tight," he said, and then they were moving, the horse's hooves striking cobblestones in a rhythm that sounded like freedom. Behind them, the palace lights blazed, unaware that the king's bride had just vanished into the night. Before them, the road to Scotland stretched long and uncertain, and between them, pressed close in the saddle, the first fragile threads of something neither had expected began to weave themselves into being. As London's streets gave way to open countryside, Rosalind tilted her face toward the stars and breathed deeply for the first time in months. Tomorrow there would be consequences. Tomorrow the king's rage would shake the kingdom. Tomorrow her family would learn of her choice. But tonight she was free, and she was choosing her own path at last. The scandal would be talked about for generations. The runaway bride, the traitorous prince, the night that changed the line of succession and rewrote the rules of royal duty. But that story would be told by others. This story, the one unfolding in the darkness as two hearts found each other against all reason and expectation, this story belonged only to them. The miles disappeared beneath the horse's hooves. London faded behind them like a bad dream. And Lady Rosalind Thorne, who had been trained all her life to sit still and silent and obedient, discovered what it felt like to run. The dawn found them 20 miles north of London, the horse leathered and weary beneath them. Adrian guided the mare off the main road, into a dense copse of trees, where the morning mist hung thick and concealing among the branches. "We'll rest here for a few hours," he said, dismounting and then helping Rosalind down. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and she felt the heat of his touch even through her torn gown. "The horse needs water, and we both need sleep. We'll ride again at noon when the roads are busiest, and we can blend with travelers." Rosalind's legs trembled as her feet touched solid ground. Hours in the saddle, combined with the adrenaline of their escape, had left her body shaking with exhaustion. She leaned against a tree trunk, watching as Adrian unpacked supplies from the saddlebags, blankets, bread, cheese, a flask of water. "You thought of everything," she observed, her voice tinged with wonder. Adrian glanced up at her, his expression suddenly vulnerable. "I thought of you, every detail, every possible complication." He spread one of the blankets on the ground beneath the largest oak tree. "I've been planning this escape for 3 months, Rosalind. 3 months of watching you fade. 3 months of hating my father for treating you like property. 3 months of falling in," he stopped abruptly, then finished more quietly, "of realizing I couldn't let tomorrow happen. Falling in love." He had almost said it. Rosalind's heart stuttered in her chest. She settled onto the blanket, accepting the piece of bread he offered her. For a moment, they ate in silence, the reality of what they had done beginning to sink in. Somewhere behind them, the palace was waking. Her mother would knock on her chamber door to begin wedding preparations. When there was no answer, servants would be summoned. The door would be forced open, and they would find an empty room, an open window, a rope tied to the bedpost. "The king will send soldiers after us," Rosalind said quietly. "He won't let this stand. His pride won't allow it." Adrian nodded grimly. "I know, which is why we must reach Scotland as quickly as possible. Once we're married there, English law protects us. He cannot annul a consummated marriage without my consent, and I will never give it." Consummated. The word hung in the air between them, carrying implications that made Rosalind's cheeks warm. She had been prepared to fulfill that duty with King Edmund, a cold, clinical transaction. But with Adrian, the thought stirred something entirely different. Not obligation. Something warmer, something that felt almost like want. "Are you afraid?" Adrian asked, watching her face carefully. "Of me? Of what we're doing?" Rosalind considered the question honestly. "I should be terrified. I've left everything I've ever known. I've betrayed my king, my family, every expectation placed on me since birth." She met his gaze directly, "But all I feel is relief, and something else I don't quite have words for yet." "Try," he urged gently. "I want to know what you're feeling, Rosalind. All of it. The good, the uncertain, the complicated. We're partners in this now. No more walls between us." The request was so different from everything she had been taught about marriage. Wives were meant to be decorative and silent. Their feelings were irrelevant. Their thoughts were not to be shared. But Adrian was asking her to speak, to be real, to exist fully in his presence. "I feel," she began slowly, "like I've been asleep for 22 years and just woke up. Like I've been living in black and white. And suddenly there's color." She gestured at the forest around them. The dappled sunlight through the leaves, the rich brown of the earth, the green of new growth. "Even running for our lives feels more alive than sitting in the palace preparing to marry your father." Adrian's hand reached across the space between them, his fingers intertwining with hers. "My father is a good king," he said quietly. "Just and fair in matters of state. But he's a terrible husband. He sees women as tools for dynasty. When my mother died giving birth to me, he mourned for exactly 1 week before beginning negotiations for his second wife." He paused, pain flickering across his features. "I've watched him break 3 women, Rosalind. I will not stand by and watch him break a 4th. Tell me about them," she requested softly. "The queens before me. No one speaks of them at court, except in whispers." Adrian was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Queen Catherine, his second wife, was vibrant when she arrived. I was only 5, but I remember her laughter. She tried to mother me. My father forbade it, said it would make me soft. She gave him 2 daughters, but no sons. He barely spoke to her after the second girl was born. She died of fever when I was 7, but I think she died of loneliness long before her body gave out." Rosalind's chest tightened at the image. "And the third queen?"
"Queen Margaret. She lasted 3 years. Quiet, obedient, perfect in every way. She gave my father a son who lived only 2 days. After that, she seemed to simply disappear while still alive. One morning, she walked into the rose garden and never came back inside. They found her sitting on a bench, staring at nothing. She remained that way for 6 months, until pneumonia took her. The horror of it settled over Rosalind like a shroud. And the 4th, Queen Anne. You would have liked her. She loved books and had a sharp wit. My father married her 4 years ago when I was 22. She tried to befriend me, to build some warmth in the palace. He struck her once for laughing too loudly at dinner. After that, she learned to be silent. She died in childbirth 2 years ago, along with the baby, another son." Her voice cracked on the word. "I held her hand while she was dying. She asked me to promise that I wouldn't let this happen again, that I would stand up to him." Tears slipped down Rosalind's cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Adrian." His blue eyes, when they met hers, were filled with old pain and new determination. "So am I, which is why, when my father announced his engagement to you, I knew I couldn't keep that promise by staying silent. I could only keep it by taking action." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Even if it costs me the throne, even if it costs me everything."
The weight of his sacrifice struck her fully. You're giving up your inheritance for me, your future, your crown. Adrian shook his head. I'm giving up a throne I never wanted for a future I desperately do. There's a difference. He moved closer, until they were sitting side by side, shoulders touching. I never wanted to be king. Rosalind, I've watched what it does to people. The isolation, the impossible choices, the slow erosion of humanity under the weight of the crown. He turned to face her fully. But I do want a life that means something. A partnership built on choice and respect. A chance to love and be loved without the suffocating requirements of royalty. And you think we can have that? She asked. Two fugitives fleeing the king's wrath, starting over with nothing. We have more than nothing, he replied. We have courage. We have each other. And we have the truth on our side, even if the law isn't. His hand cupped her face with exquisite gentleness. I know this isn't the grand romance young ladies dream of. I know I'm asking you to accept hardship instead of jewels, uncertainty instead of security, but I'm also offering you freedom. Rosalind, real freedom. The kind that terrifies and exhilarates in equal measure. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. In the palace, she had been a possession. Here, in this forest clearing, with dawn breaking through the trees, she was becoming something else. A person, a partner, someone whose choices mattered. When did you know, she asked softly, that you wanted to do this? Adrian's smile was small and sad. The engagement ball. You were standing in the rose garden alone, and I could see you weren't crying, but you looked like someone who had forgotten how. I introduced myself, and you curtsied so perfectly, said all the right things, but your eyes were already dead. Rosalind, already resigned. He shook his head. I went back to my chambers that night and couldn't sleep. All I could think was that in 3 months, that light would be completely extinguished, and I couldn't let that happen. No one has ever fought for me before, she whispered. Then they were fools, he replied. Simply, you're worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. The words settled between them, heavy with meaning and possibility. Rosalind studied his face, memorizing the strong lines of his jaw, the warmth in his eyes, the sincerity in his expression. This man had upended his entire life for her, not for political advantage, not for beauty or wealth or family connection, but because he had seen her, truly seen her when she was invisible to everyone else. Adrian, she began, then hesitated. I need you to understand something. I don't love you, not yet. I barely know you. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been disappointment. I know, but I want to, she continued, her voice strengthening. I want to know you. I want to learn who you are beyond the prince I've seen at court. I want to discover if this feeling in my chest, this warmth and hope and terrifying possibility, if it might grow into love. She took a shaky breath. I'm grateful to you for saving me, but I don't want gratitude to be the foundation of whatever we build. I want something real. Adrian's face transformed, relief and joy and something deeper flooding his features. That's all I'm asking for, Rosalind. A chance, time, the space to discover each other without the weight of crowns and expectations crushing us. He pulled her closer until her head rested against his shoulder. We'll have the rest of our lives to figure out if what I feel now might grow into something you can feel too. And what do you feel now? She asked, her voice muffled against his coat. His answer was quiet but certain. Like I've been holding my breath for 26 years, and suddenly I can breathe. Like the world has color again after years of grey. Like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, even if where I'm meant to be is running from soldiers on a stolen horse with a torn dress and no clear plan beyond Scotland." Rosalind smiled, despite everything. "That's quite romantic for someone who claims not to be offering a grand romance." "I said it wasn't what you might have dreamed of as a girl," he countered. "I never said it wasn't romantic. There's a difference between fairy tale romance and real romance. One is perfect and impossible. The other is messy and complicated and utterly worth it." They fell silent, exhaustion pulling at both of them. Around them, the forest woke fully. Birds called to each other. Small creatures rustled in the underbrush. The sun climbed higher, warming the air. Adrian lay back on the blanket, pulling Rosalind with him until they were side by side, her head pillowed on his shoulder. "Sleep," he murmured. "I'll wake you when it's time to ride again." "What if soldiers find us?" she asked, though her eyes were already drifting closed. "Then I'll protect you," he promised. His arms tightened around her. "I didn't bring you this far to lose you now." Rosalind allowed herself to relax into his embrace, the solid warmth of him chasing away the chill of the morning air. For the first time in 3 months, since the engagement had been announced, she slept without nightmares, without dreams of cold hands and colder eyes, without the suffocating weight of duty pressing down on her chest. She slept in Adrian's arms, with the forest whispering around them and freedom stretching ahead like an unwritten page. And when she woke 3 hours later to find him still holding her, his own eyes just opening, his first words were, "Still here, still here." She confirmed. "Good," he said simply. "Then let's keep running." They reached the Scottish border 6 days later, having ridden hard through rain and shine, sleeping in haystacks and abandoned cottages, living on bread and cheese and stolen apples from roadside orchards. Rosalind's fine gown was ruined beyond recognition, torn and mud-stained, and utterly unsuitable for a former lady of the court. Adrian's coat was similarly worse for wear, his face shadowed with several days' growth of beard. They looked like vagabonds, criminals, runaways. They had never been more alive. The village of Gretna Green sat just across the border, famous throughout England as the place where couples could marry quickly under Scottish law, without parental consent or lengthy negotiations. The blacksmith's forge served as the unofficial wedding chapel, where hundreds of eloping couples had exchanged vows over the anvil. As their horse clip-clopped down the main street, drawing curious stares from villagers, Rosalind felt her heart begin to race. This was it, the point of no return. Once they spoke their vows, there would be no going back, no undoing their choice, no returning to her former life. "Are you ready?" Adrian asked quietly, his hand covering hers where it rested against his waist. Rosalind thought about the palace, the crown waiting on a velvet cushion, the king's cold eyes, the whispered stories of 3 dead queens, the slow suffocation of duty and expectation. Then she thought about the past 6 days, the laughter shared over a pathetic dinner of stale bread, the conversations that lasted deep into the night, learning each other's histories and hopes. The moment 3 days ago when Adrian had given her his coat during a rainstorm, standing in the downpour himself rather than let her get wet. The way he asked her opinion on their route, their plans, their future, as if her thoughts mattered as much as his. The way he looked at her, not like a possession or a vessel or a duty, but like a person he was genuinely coming to care for. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm ready." The blacksmith's forge was warm and smoky, lit by the glow of hot coals and the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. The blacksmith himself, a burly man named MacGregor, with kind eyes and enormous hands, looked them over with a knowing expression. "Another pair of English runaways," he observed,
not unkindly, running from disapproving parents. Are you? Adrian met his gaze steadily. Running from something far more dangerous than disapproval. But yes, we wish to be married immediately. MacGregor studied them more closely, and Rosalind saw the moment recognition dawned in his eyes. He had seen Adrian's face before, probably on coins or royal proclamations. His gaze shifted to Rosalind, taking in her fine features beneath the dirt and exhaustion. "Well now," he said slowly, "this is interesting. Will you marry us?" Adrian asked, a note of urgency entering his voice. "Or must we find someone else?" The blacksmith was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the hiss of the forge and the hammer strikes from his apprentice in the back room. Then he nodded once, decisively. "I'll marry you. Scottish law says any two people can wed with proper witnesses and intention. Doesn't matter if you're prince or pauper, English or Scottish." His expression grew serious. "But understand this, lad. Marriage isn't a game. It's not a shield against consequences. Whatever you're running from will still be there tomorrow." "I know," Adrian replied, "but we'll face it together, as husband and wife, with the protection of law behind us." MacGregor called for his wife and apprentice to serve as witnesses, then positioned Adrian and Rosalind before the anvil. The ceremony was simple, stripped of all the pomp and ceremony that would have accompanied Rosalind's wedding to the king. No orchestra, no cathedral, no bishops in elaborate robes. Just two people choosing each other, making promises before God and witnesses, binding themselves together, not because of duty or dynasty, but because they wanted to. "Do you, Adrian Blackthorne, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" MacGregor asked in his rough burr. "To have and to hold, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, till death parts you." Adrian's blue eyes never left Rosalind's face. "I do," he said clearly. "With all my heart and will and strength, I do." "And do you, Rosalind Thorne, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, by the same vows and promises?" Rosalind thought of all the paths her life might have taken. The crown she would never wear, the palace she would never rule, the cold duty she had narrowly escaped. Then she thought of the man before her, who had risked everything to offer her a choice, who had shown her what it meant to be valued, to be heard, to be free. "I do," she said, her voice ringing clear in the forge. "With all my heart and will and strength, I do." Then by the powers invested in me under Scottish law, MacGregor declared, "I pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined, let no man put asunder." He gestured toward Adrian. "You may kiss your bride, lad." Adrian's hands cupped Rosalind's face with infinite gentleness, and when he kissed her, it was nothing like the formal, bloodless kiss she had been dreading with King Edmund. This kiss was warm and real, and full of promise. It tasted of freedom and possibility, and the beginning of something neither could fully name yet, but both desperately wanted to discover. When they finally parted, MacGregor was grinning. "Welcome to Scotland, Prince Adrian, Princess Rosalind. May your marriage bring you joy, and may it weather whatever storm follows you across that border." That storm arrived 2 hours later, in the form of 50 mounted soldiers wearing the king's colours. They thundered into Gretna Green with swords drawn and fury in their eyes, led by Lord Commander Griffith, the king's most loyal officer. Adrian and Rosalind were sitting in the village inn, sharing a simple meal of stew and bread, when the door burst open and soldiers flooded inside. Griffith's gaze locked on Adrian immediately, his face contorted with rage. "Your Highness," he spat the title like a curse. "By order of King Edmund III, you are under arrest for treason, kidnapping, and theft of royal property." Adrian rose slowly,
positioning himself between Rosalind and the soldiers. "I have committed no treason, Commander. I am a free man exercising my right to marry whom I choose, and my wife," he emphasized the word, "is not property. She is Princess Rosalind of House Blackthorn now, legally wed under Scottish law." Griffith's sneer was ugly. "Scottish law means nothing to the English crown. The king demands both of you return immediately to face justice." Adrian's voice, when he replied, was cold as winter. "And what justice would that be, Commander? Forcing a woman to marry against her will? Punishing a prince for protecting an innocent? My father may be king, but even kings must answer to God's law. We are married, Griffith. That cannot be undone." The commander's hand moved to his sword. "The king will determine what can and cannot be undone." But before he could draw the weapon, MacGregor stepped forward from where he had been watching the confrontation unfold. A dozen burly villagers moved with him, blacksmiths and farmers and shepherds, armed with hammers and staffs and sheer Scottish stubbornness. "This is Scotland, Commander," MacGregor said flatly. "English soldiers have no authority here. The prince and his bride were wed, legally and properly. You cannot take them without permission of the Scottish magistrate." Griffith's face purpled. "This is an international incident. The king will declare war over a lawful marriage." MacGregor shook his head. "I doubt it. Even kings must pick their battles wisely. Starting a war because a prince chose to marry someone other than his father's choice. That's not justice, man. That's tyranny." A murmur of agreement rippled through the gathered villagers. More people were entering the inn, drawn by the commotion. The soldiers, outnumbered and on foreign soil, began to look uncertain. Adrian seized the moment. "Tell my father," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the inn, "that I have married Rosalind Thorne with all proper legal authority. She is my wife, a princess of the realm, and under my protection. Any harm that comes to her is harm done to me. Any attempt to annul our marriage will be contested in every court, English and Scottish both." He paused, then added more quietly, "Tell my father that I love him, but I cannot allow him to destroy another good woman in pursuit of an heir. This ends now." Griffith stared at Adrian for a long, tense moment. Then his gaze shifted to Rosalind, assessing her. She met his eyes steadily, refusing to cower, refusing to be diminished. She had been many things in her life, timid, obedient, invisible, but she was none of those things now. The commander sheathed his sword. "The king will not be pleased." "Many things displease my father," Adrian replied. "This is but one more. Tell him I will write to him when tempers have cooled and reason can prevail. Until then, my wife and I will remain in Scotland under the protection of Scottish law." Griffith gave a sharp nod, turned on his heel, and strode from the inn. His soldiers followed, though several cast curious backward glances at the prince who had defied his king for love. When the door closed behind them, Rosalind released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Adrian turned to her immediately, his hands finding hers. "Are you all right?" "I am now," she said, and realized it was completely true. The confrontation that should have terrified her had instead made her feel stronger. She had stood beside Adrian as his equal partner. She had not been hidden or dismissed or treated as property. She had been seen, acknowledged, defended. MacGregor clapped Adrian on the shoulder. "Well done, lad. You've got the heart of a true Scot, even if you were born south of the border." They remained in Gretna Green for 3 more days, while MacGregor helped Adrian send word to allies in Edinburgh and London, beginning the delicate work of securing their position legally and politically. Messages went out to members of Parliament who had long questioned King Edmund's fitness to rule. Letters were drafted to the Archbishop, appealing to the sanctity of marriage vows properly made.
Adrian even penned a careful missive to his father, explaining his actions and asking for understanding, if not immediate forgiveness. And through it all, Rosalind and Adrian learned each other. They walked the Scottish hills hand in hand, talking about their childhoods and dreams. They sat by the inn's fire in the evenings, Adrian reading aloud while Rosalind mended his torn coat. They shared a small room and a narrow bed, and discovered that intimacy could be gentle, unhurried, full of laughter and whispered words and gradual discovery. On their fourth morning in Scotland, a letter arrived bearing the royal seal. Adrian opened it with trembling hands, Rosalind standing close beside him, her hand on his arm. The letter was brief, formal, but its contents made Adrian's breath catch. "Prince Adrian," it read in the king's angular script, "you have caused me considerable embarrassment and political difficulty. You have defied my direct command and stolen a bride meant for my own use. By all rights, I should disown you entirely. However, I am informed by wiser heads than mine that a public scandal would damage the crown more than a private reconciliation. I am further informed that forcing Princess Rosalind into a marriage she clearly did not desire would have ended as poorly as my previous unions. Therefore, I acknowledge your marriage to Lady Rosalind Thorne, now Princess Rosalind of House Blackthorn. You will remain in Scotland for 1 year, during which time we shall not communicate. After that period, if you still wish to be my heir, we shall discuss terms for your return to court. If you do not, I will name your cousin Robert as my successor. Govern yourself accordingly. Edmund." Adrian read the letter twice, then looked at Rosalind with wonder in his eyes. "He's letting us go. For now," she cautioned, though her heart soared. "With conditions and consequences, but yes, he's letting us choose our own path." Adrian pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "A year in Scotland. A year to build our life away from court, away from the crown, away from all the poisonous expectations." His voice was rough with emotion. "A year to figure out if we can be truly happy." Rosalind held him tightly, thinking of all that had changed in the space of 1 week. The woman who had stood before a mirror in the palace, resigned to a cold marriage and an early death, felt like a stranger now. In her place was someone braver, someone who had chosen her own fate and found unexpected partnership along the way. "We can," she said with certainty. "We will." And they did. The year in Scotland became 2, then 3. Adrian purchased a small estate in the Highlands, where they raised sheep and grew gardens and lived simply. Rosalind discovered a talent for managing the estate's accounts. Adrian found satisfaction in working with his hands, repairing fences and buildings alongside hired men. They had 2 children in those years. A daughter named Catherine, after Adrian's lost stepmother. A son named Edmund, in a gesture of reconciliation toward the grandfather who eventually reluctantly came to visit. King Edmund, seeing his son happy and his grandchildren healthy, finally understood what he had failed to grasp in 4 previous marriages, that love and partnership produced stronger heirs than duty and cold obligation ever could. When the old king died 7 years after their elopement, Adrian was called to London to claim his crown. He and Rosalind faced the choice together: return to court with all its responsibilities and restrictions, or remain in Scotland as private citizens, allowing cousin Robert to inherit. They chose return, but on their own terms. King Adrian I ruled with his queen Rosalind beside him, not as ornament but as true partner. They transformed the court, emphasizing compassion alongside justice, partnership alongside power, and every year on the anniversary of their wedding, they returned to Gretna Green, to the blacksmith's forge, where 2 desperate souls had chosen each other against all odds and impossibilities.
Because some choices, no matter how risky or frightening in the moment, become the foundation of everything beautiful that follows. And some nights, when the moon is bright and the palace feels too cold, it's worth remembering that freedom is always just one brave choice away. In a world ruled by duty and expectation, where women are often treated as property and marriage as transaction, there lies a profound truth, that love, when given freely, holds more power than all the crowns and kingdoms in the world. Rosalind's story teaches us that we are never truly trapped unless we believe ourselves to be. That one moment of courage, one choice made in defiance of what others expect, can transform an entire life. She was trained from birth to be obedient, to accept her fate without question. But when Adrian extended his hand through that window, offering freedom, she found the strength to reach back. Adrian's sacrifice reminds us that true nobility isn't about titles or bloodlines. It's about choosing integrity over comfort. He could have watched Rosalind marry his father, keeping his inheritance intact and his future secure. Instead, he risked everything to give her what no one else had thought to offer: a choice. Perhaps the deepest wisdom in their story is this: that partnerships built on respect and genuine care, even when they begin in crisis and uncertainty, can grow into something more lasting than relationships built on practical advantage. Rosalind and Adrian didn't start with passionate love. They started with recognition, with seeing each other clearly, with choosing to build something together rather than accepting what others had decided for them. The question their story poses to each of us is simple but profound. When faced with the choice between safety and freedom, between pleasing others and honoring ourselves, what would we choose? And would we have the courage to choose it, even knowing the cost? Did this story of courage and choice touch your heart? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which moment resonated with you most? Was it Rosalind's decision at the window? Adrian's defiance of his father? Their simple wedding at the forge? If you believe that love should always be a choice rather than an obligation, please like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to choose differently. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to never miss another story of hearts transformed by courage, compassion, and the radical act of choosing love over duty. Stay with us until the end. There's another powerful tale of Victorian love and defiance waiting for you next. Click the screen when it appears to continue your journey through the most compelling love stories ever told. Thank you for joining us. Until our next story, remember that the bravest choice is always the one that honors your own heart.